Well, one, I want to open with an apology. And as one of my buddies brought out, he's like, Ken, I got home last week and my wife said, hey, what'd you guys learn? And one of the staples of our time is that I always end with, hey, at your table, discuss. What are one or two or three takeaways? Because your wife will ask you, what did you learn? And you have at least one or two to pick from. So I will get better at that this week, because there's nothing worse than a deer in headlights going, oh, what'd you talk about? Man stuff and how to include that in there. And I want to kind of kick off tonight with where we ended up. One, I want to have a quick discussion at the tables of really to kick off the idea of create and cultivate. And I love that Ryan just shared that's what we were in God's image meant to do. So I'll give you the question in a minute, but it's really about what have I done and what am I doing and what will I do and where's my focus? And the question is simply this. It's not going to be on the board, but what is some point of your life? And I want each guy to just share something, either that you failed to create and it's kind of come to bite you in the butt over time, or you failed to cultivate and that has kind of got you. Or on the positive side, you know what? I try to cultivate this, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a habit, whether it's a discipline. What do you create or cultivate that benefits you? I'll give you one example and then the reason behind it. One for us is that my wife and I said, hey, you know what? We're going to make a decision. And I initiated this. But I said, when we get married, and we were just about to get married, I said, we're going to live on one income. And she was a teacher, and she did really well. And she said, okay, why would we do that? I said, well, here's the deal. We're going to put yours aside. I said, but you're not going to have to work when we have kids. You're going to get to make that choice, that decision. And we talked through that, and she goes, oh, I like that. She goes, well, what are we going to do with the other one? I said, well, we're going to pay off any debt. She still had a little debt, because another one we cultivated and talked about is we're not going to live with debt. And that was another piece that we cultivated. Well, that turned into a habit that down the road paid off huge benefits. One, when we were expecting after year 2 of marriage, she's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And I'm like, we're going to just adjust a little bit and we're going to be fine. And she's like, okay. And she goes, well, I don't know if I want to go back or not. And I said, well, here's the good news. You have a choice. And I said, here's the deal. You've got to go back after maternity leave for 2 weeks in order for insurance to pay everything. And then we'll get insurance and I'll deal with that. And I said, but you make that decision and I'm going to support it. And man, what a monumental cultivation. About at the end of week 1, she came home crying from school one day. I'm like, whoa, what's wrong? What's wrong? Because I had 2 weeks where I was with our oldest son, and she goes, I don't want to go back to work. And I was like, okay, well, buck up, little camper, for one more week, and then we're good. And so she did. And that was one that we cultivated. Now, the reason I brought that up and the foundation for it is, real quickly, I work out at the YMCA. There's 1.5 miles from our house. I ride my bike there for a warm-up, and then I do my cardio, do a little lift, and I do some push-ups and sit-ups, and then I ride my bike home. But what really gets me is it's a great habit to have, and it's one I've gotten into, especially since my heart issue, that's really benefited me. But what makes me laugh is the YMCA. Does anybody know what YMCA stands for? Young Men's Christian Association. Well, when I go, maybe it's just when I go, there is nobody there under 40 years old. Okay, so the young is out. And at least 2/3 are women. And I literally looked at the staff, and there are all different types of religions represented and very little, if any, Christian influence in there. And I said, you shouldn't call yourselves the Y, you should just call yourselves the A. Because you're just an association of whatever you believe in now. So it doesn't really stand for anything. But the part that really gets me is that every time I go, I get there usually early in the morning, there's a table about, half again this size, and there's about 10 people around it. And they're all over 50. And they all sit there and they drink coffee and they talk. And they're there when I get there. And they're still sitting there when I go home. And if you were to say, hey, define how good a shape they're in, I would look and go, yeah, not so much. They're there, but they don't get it. And they're not really cultivating what the whole purpose is. Now, they're cultivating great relationships and they've got some camaraderie. But if the point is to work out and get in shape, they're there, but they're not getting it. And what I don't want to happen is for that to be here, where I got some good information, but I don't really do anything with it. And so with that, I want you to talk about cultivate or create. What's something you've created or you wish you had created, cultivated or wish you cultivated, and or how does that work out? And you're going to have about 7 to 10 minutes to do this. Try to think really hard and have each guy share something in that process. So I'll give you a few-minute warning, like a 2-minute warning when we get there, but go. What did you or didn't you cultivate or create? Go. All right. Well, we got a couple more discussion times. You can pick up later where you left off or on the new questions. But if you have your book, turn to page 40, and we're going to jump right into it with a quick recap blank. But it's going to be really good. So make a note. If one of the guys shared something in your table, you're like, man, I wish I'd have thought about that, or wow, I'm glad I didn't make that mistake or whatever. Make a note of that. So when you get home and somebody says, what did you talk about? You can say, you know what, one of the guys really had a great idea, or this happened or something else, and that's a bonus section. But on page 40 at the top, the introduction section there kind of gets us transitioning from last week to this. In the last session, we learned that God designed men to follow his example and to, anyone? Yeah, that's the last part. Specifically by cultivating and creating, but to lead. Bang, there it is. In case you didn't know how to spell lead, now there it is. And then secondly, the most importantly, we learned the last session, the type of manhood God created us to live. And you can underline any part of this next little segment, cannot be done by self-effort. A real vibrant relationship with Christ can provide us with fuel we need to live out authentic manhood. It really is. He created it. He wants to give it to us and live it through us. If you want to write down a very cool verse in this realm, it's Isaiah 41:10. For God says, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you and uphold you with my righteous right hand. In other words, God says, don't try to do this alone. I'm with you in the middle of this. And there's a great, website. I think that's the next one. If you're thinking, okay, what does a relationship with Christ really mean? Please ask me or John or Ryan. But you can also just check it out and go through some really cool verses there at that website. So here we go. Here's some of the core. And we're going to discuss what each of these means. 3 areas of responsibility. So what am I responsible to do? God gave man a will to obey. He puts that within us, the spark in our soul. God have us a will greater than our own to obey. In other words, I know that there's something bigger than me. I know that there's a truth that I haven't been able to live up to. And every one of us, and I'm not going to ask you to share yours because I'm not going to tell you mine, but there's that one, that habitual area I realize no matter how much I go, I can't sustain that level of righteousness in that area. And it's only and until I go, God, help, and start experiencing his truth in my life that I can live it. Secondly, God gave man a work to do. Follow God's example to create and cultivate. You are uniquely designed to create and or cultivate different parts of your life, as am I. And it's going to be different for everybody. Some similarities, some very different. But we were created he gave us a work to do. And then third, God gave man a woman to love. He gave him Eve, a companion for intimacy and fellowship. That's what he gave us for. So in this next discussion, I'll put these up here in a second, but out of those, to just take a second and talk through, okay, does this make sense? The will, the work, the woman, that's the 3 W's, and this is a great one for when we're asked, what'd you guys talk about? Well, God gave us a will and a work and a woman, and how am I cultivating that, and how am I doing in that? I heard a phenomenal example of at least the woman part of it, I've listened a lot to Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you know who Jordan Peterson is, a psychologist. And I love two things he said. One, I may have shared it last week. He was just talking about to women. He was speaking to a couples thing. And he said, if you're a woman, you think, man, he's just not sensitive and he's just not living up and he's not very smart. And he goes, well, that means you're an idiot because you married him. And it's just as big of your fault as it is his. And then he goes on to just really give this, that as men, we were created to fix. That is the way we were created. That is the way we're wired. When we hear a problem, well, let me fix it. And he gave this incredible cultivation example of a woman to love. He says, when women come and they're troubled or they're afraid or they're frustrated, we want to jump in and just fix it. But he says, the truth is we were meant to cultivate that. One, he says, you need to find out first and foremost, clarify, what are they worried about? Because there's a really good chance, because the way they're wired, she doesn't even know. And so we're trying to fix an engine while it's still running and without any idea what's going on. He says, pause, stop, turn the engine off and just go, hey, unpack this. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? And he says, a lot of times what she's going to find is she's going to start naming things, and then she's going to start eliminating them as fast as she's naming them, and just listen to like, okay, well, that part of fixing is the diagnostic of what's really wrong. If somebody brings a car in, say, hey, I need you to fix my car. Well, what are the symptoms? What's going on? Well, the light came on. Okay, the engine light or the light that your tire light? Which light came on? And to get through that to the point, and then he talks about listening and then starting to cultivate or engage. Well, it sounds like you're frustrated with this. Well, no, not really, but then they get into something else. And it's like, wow, how amazing is that to cultivate that? So, with this, the companion, the intimacy, answer this question around the tables, and you have about 5 to 7 minutes. Men were created to create and cultivate. How does this fit with the function of the 3 areas of responsibility mentioned here? A will to obey, a work to do, and a woman to love. How are we to cultivate or create a will to obey, a work to do, and a woman to love? So just your thoughts, your feelings about those 3 areas and create and cultivate. You got about 7 minutes to do that. Go. Okay. Got a couple questions for you. I would love to hear what was shared at your table, just 1 or 2 thoughts about each. So as far as a will to obey, what did you guys discuss? Anybody hit that one? And what was kind of a consensus of what was going on with the will to obey? We solved it. Great. Do tell. Okay. I love that. Just to stop, yeah. Is it conscious or developed? I think it's both. It's probably in there somewhere, but it's like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it's going to atrophy after a while. At least that's my experience. The more I exercise that, the more apt I am to exercise that. That's a great one. How about with the, anybody else have the will to obey that's not natural? Yeah, engage him in it. You know, I've heard so many guys that have gotten to that point in their work. They say, I'm just going to start doing that. And I would say probably 10% of the time they're like, man, I saw something I didn't see in the process of that project, and I decided not to do it. But 90% of the time, guys are like, I stopped at that. And I literally say, God, if this is, the best, just give me a peace or give me a clarity or whatever. And just by engaging, he said, and I've seen this multiple times, they saw more opportunity, more angles to engage even more and even be more profitable. But they wouldn't have seen it had they not stopped and thought, ooh, or they would have seen it way down the road when it was too late. And that's about a 90-10 split that I've heard that. Because I think one of the fears is, man, this is going to be such a great piece of business. And if I ask God, he's going to say not to do it. And this is just, I really want to do this. And I think God just proves himself going, let me show you even more. Let me show you things you can't see. And I love that. I think it's Jeremiah 33:3. It says, call to me and I will answer. And I will tell you great and mighty things you don't know. And I'm like, wow, okay. And I've heard it called God's phone number, which is Jeremiah 33:3. Just call me and I'm going to answer. And if we'll stop and listen in that. I love that. How about the woman to love? Cultivate. We hit that a little bit. We need to listen a little bit more. and a little bit better? Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Well, we're about to see on page 41 that we're all guilty. We're all guilty, and it started from the very, very beginning of kind of trying to do it of our own steam. Number one on that page, the Bible describes Jesus, and follow me on this, as the second Adam. Okay? And the Apostle Paul writes a really cool clarification on this in Romans chapter 5. He says, "For if, because the first Adam, or the first man's trespasses, death reigned through that man, much more will those who receive the abundance of grace and the free gift of righteousness reign in the lives through the one man," or the second Adam, Jesus Christ. For as by one man's disobedient, Adam, the many were made sinners and ultimately we're going to die because of that, so by one man's obedience, many will be made righteous. And if you can just see those two extremes on each end, and I love that it just really spells that out really clear. Through Adam, sin entered the world, but through Jesus, righteousness entered the world. And when we invite Christ into our lives, I love this reality. It's not a list of do's and don'ts that we have to live up to. It says when Christ comes in, we have the full righteousness of the perfect person, Jesus. And what we get to do is discover that righteousness in any area of life that we decide, okay, for our free will, Lord, what about this one? What about this woman that I have no clue what to do with? What about this? And I'm telling you, I've prayed that 100 times, and 100 times God shows up and goes, well, I'll have an idea that was not there before. This is what I needed in that moment. And he wants us to have that righteousness. Look at this next blank. Jesus fulfilled the responsibilities of the first Adam who failed miserably. And we were all destined, if we're going to try to do it our own, to really mess up. Thus it is written, the first Adam became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. The first man was from the earth, a man made of dust, and the second one was born from heaven, from God himself. I love this number 2. Every man, and I would say every man every day in every category, will walk in the shadow of one of these two men. And I can tell you that I've walked, and it's my tendency, and I think it's our tendency, to walk in Christ in the areas where we're seeing progress and we're seeing success and we feel good about, like, wow, I'm doing good here. But the real men are going to be the ones that go, okay, Lord, here's the areas where I'm falling short. Will you shine a little light in there and show me what and how to change? Because I'm still drawn to it, or I'm still failing there, and will you just help me in that? Because Jesus will always show up. The first Adam chose conventional manhood. It's a manhood based on personal instinct, human reason, and human reactions. And I want you to put this out in the margins. This past week, my wife, she said, hey, I've heard about this movie. Somebody told me about it. It's a lot of character driven. It's a little slow, but they said it was really, really good, and it's a true story. And I'm like, do tell. So we went to see it. It's called The Blind. It's an actual, based on the true life of Phil Robertson, who is the Duck Dynasty dude. And it's his life story. And I'm going to tell you, I was a little tired, and I had to shake myself twice while I was in there, but amazingly beautiful on the screen example of two Adams and what happens in both situations. And it was really, really good. If not in the movie theater, I would encourage you, maybe even watch it with your wife. And just not only entertaining and a really cool story, a lot of things I didn't realize about it, but it was really, really cool to see these two extremes. So the final number 4, Jesus is the example of authentic manhood. In other words, what we were meant to be. So here's my question before we move on. This is not rhetorical. This is out in the open. How did Jesus cultivate that relationship with the Father? What are some ways, just think about Jesus living his life. How did he cultivate that manhood? Think about some of the conversations he had or what he did and how he did it. What were some of the ways he cultivated that? Prayer, absolutely. He talked to the Father. Absolutely. What's some other evidence that what he did? He taught. Yeah, he did. He taught his disciples. He spent time with those guys. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't poetry and sitting around in bathrobes. You can't tell me that 12 guys around a campfire didn't get really real. And if you haven't seen any of The Chosen, that's probably the best example that tries to move in that direction. And I love the interactions there. But he just interacted. And I would add a third one to that. Not only fellowship, not only praying with the Father, but he was always, especially when tension came and conflict, he was always quoting the truth. So he spent time in the Old Testament and he would quote it and just say, hey, and I'm going to tell you, in tough times, the more I ingest God's word, the more clearly it comes to my mind in times that I need it most. And it's just really cool that God will bring up, like this past week, one of my favorite verses is from Romans. It says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And I was praying this morning. I'm like, Lord, what verse do you want me to focus on this week? And that one just kind of came to my mind. I'm like, that's really cool. And then I tuned in on my way to the airport to listen to the sermon from this morning because I didn't get a chance to go. What verse do you think he spoke on? That exact verse. And I'm like, what are the odds out of all the verses in the Bible that would be it? And then to hear it again through another podcast, I'm like, okay, Lord, I get it. And it's just really cool that when we put that in, God brings it to memory and brings it back. So consider those three. So on the next page, we're going to get to the actual definition of authentic manhood. And it's 3 parts. And this is here's what we talked about, because we are going to have a chance to really unpack it. First one is a compelling definition of this. Number 1, 2 words, reject passivity. Reject passivity. And at the very beginning, look at the passive husband here. So when the woman saw the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eye, she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Not only did he not step up and go, hey, I don't think we're supposed to eat that. I think God said this is the tree we're not supposed to eat from. He put up nothing whatsoever. And not only did he not put up any leadership there, he was just like, okay, well, I mean, you ate it, I'll eat it. Okay, let's just do that. Complete passivity. Reject passivity. And if you want to look at it another way, this is how Jesus rejected passivity. Jesus, and you can see it in the middle of the page there, who though he was informed God, did not consider or count equality with God a thing to be grasped. But underline this, but made himself nothing. He chose to actively say, okay, I need help. To be a form of a servant, to be being born in the likeness of man. In other words, he humbled himself to be a man. Being found in human form, he humbled himself to become obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. That just obedience and humble and humility. We think humility is a weakness, but in reality, it is the greatest of power. And rejecting passivity. I mentioned last week briefly that Matt and his family had gone down to serve at Blue Skies, which is this camp for kids. And I'll never forget the first time my family came down with me to that. My sons had asked me, they're like, Dad, I mean, what do we do? And I said, hang out with the kids. Hang out with the kids, the 6 kids and their siblings. And here's the deal. Make sure they have fun. That's it. That's your job. And I said, if one of the leaders needs help, help them. That's it. I mean, they say, hey, I need help. Go do that. And I'll never forget the first night after the first day that all the family was there. We're exhausted. We'd been up since very early. This is the team meeting at night. It looked very similar to this, all the leaders. And the head leader, Robert Palmer, I love this guy. He was actually, his career was running the Atlanta airport. And he's just an unbelievable leader. And he got up and he says, hey, great day, and gave some hoorahs. He goes, and he didn't sell it very well. He goes, tomorrow I'm going to need 2 volunteers. You're going to have to get up a little bit early, and it's going to be kind of physical. And I'm just going to need 2 volunteers. And in a minute, and both my sons stood up and raised their hands. And he goes, you don't even know what it's for. And I'll never forget my oldest son. He says, well, you're the leader, and I trust you. So if you say you need help, I want to be the one to help. And I was like, Lord, kill me now. Let me die in peace. That was amazing. So it's that rejecting passivity and saying, what can I create? And I want to take that one step further. So my oldest son, he was 17 at the time. On the way home, he says, I talked to Miss Melinda, the woman who created this thing. He says, Miss Melinda, you need interns. You need people who are here every week that knows where everything is, so when all these new volunteers come in, they can point them in the right direction. They know what's going on and doing this. She goes, you know what? We've talked about that for several years. We just don't have the bandwidth to create that program. I wouldn't know how to. And he says, well, I'm going to create it, and I'm gonna let's meet for lunch, and I'll show you what it takes. And here's the best part: I'm going to be the first intern next year, and I'm going to raise my own support to be able to do that. They had lunch a month later. He had researched it. What does it take? How does it do that? And he was the first intern that nation. That is still going on today. That there are high school kids, they have to apply, and there's 3 to 4 of them every summer that do this internship. I just said, I'm like, who are you? And I asked my wife, where did he come from? I know it was an artificial insemination because it's not from me. And just how incredible this kid was that got this idea. I'm not going to be passive. I'm seeing need. I'm going to do something about it. It's just incredibly encouraging. So the first is reject passivity. Anybody want to take a guess at number 2? To accept responsibility. Oh, he didn't even put it up there. I'm so impressed. They got it right. Accept responsibility. Adam failed in 3 specific responsibilities that were given to him. And it was the ones we just looked at. Look at this. Jesus accepted responsibility for a will to obey. And I love this. My food is to do the will of him who sent me to accomplish his work. Secondly, Jesus accepted responsibility to do a work. I glorified you, my Father in heaven, on earth, having accomplished the work that you gave me to do, that you gave. And then thirdly, Jesus accepted the responsibility for a woman to love. And he says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. Ephesians 5:25. Now, let me give one. There's not a lot of examples where I can give this, but this was one of them where that doesn't mean we're to be domineering and that I'm responsible for everything, but especially in the woman to love. My wife is superior to me in a lot of ways. She has a master's degree. She's way smarter than I'll ever be. And there's certain decisions that we have to make that she is going to be the best one to make that decision. But here's what I've discovered. God designed us to lead, to create and cultivate. And I'll give you a perfect example. Each year we prayed about where should our kids go to school. And she's a teacher with a master's degree. She's in the educational system. She's there. And she's like, what do you think? Where should they go? Where should they go? And it just kept coming up. And I'm like, listen, you're much better qualified for this. But I had that after about the 5th time, she said, where are they going to go? We have to make a decision. The deadlines are coming up. We got to do this. I'm like, okay. And I prayed. I'm like, God, what do I do with this? She's obviously the one that's going to be the best one to make this decision. And thought in my mind that I did not have before. He's like, you're right. She is way better for this, but she's not asking what is the right decision. She's asking you to be responsible for the decision. And what that meant was, honey, I tell you what, here's why you're best to make this decision. And I gave her all of them. You know them, you've been with them at school, you know their friends, you know the best decision. But I'm going to tell you this. We are going to make the decision. And once we decide, it's on me. I'm taking full responsibility. If it goes sideways, if it goes bad, it's the worst year ever, they meet somebody and they go off the rails, that's on me, not you. It's my responsibility. Can I tell you, I saw her transform in front of me. She goes, well, here's what I really think they need to do, where they need to go, and here's why. I'm like, I agree. Do that. That's my decision. And she was like, okay, good. What did I do? All I did was say, God help, and he showed me, yeah, validate. That's what she wants. She wants you to be in it with her and take responsibility with her in it. I'm like, okay, starting to get it. So that idea of be responsible. Let me ask you this. Do you think our society as a whole is looking to take responsibility for anything? No. I shared this when I did the 4 critical decisions in here, but it bears repeating. A buddy of mine, Chuck, we were good friends in college. He was the president of a fraternity. I was the president of the biggest organization on campus. We're in the business school together. He became the mayor of Warner Robins, Georgia. It's in middle Georgia. It's a huge Air Force base. Largest logistical Air Force base in the world is in Warner Robins. And he's the mayor of the town. And I was coming back through one time and I said, hey man, what are you up to? He goes, yeah, I see you want to get lunch. He goes, why don't we play golf? I'm like, let's play golf. Well, he knows everybody in Warner Robins. So we're playing golf. I'm like, dude, you're the mayor. You're the mayor of Warner Robins. He goes, yep, worst decision I made in my life. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, Ken, it was chaos. First day in office, I had a line of 300 people that wanted to meet with me. And he said the mayor before me was in prison for embezzlement. And it was a mess. And he said after about 5 people came into my office, just about to come across my desk with what was wrong, he said, I told my secretary, just give me 5 minutes. He said, I got behind my desk, and here's a good Catholic guy who knows Jesus. So if you ever thought Catholics can't be Christians, I'm telling you they are. And they can be. They know Jesus. And he said, I prayed, and I'm like, God, help. What do I do? He says, I believe this was divine. Because I had no idea where it came from other than just that moment. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, I said, send the next one in. He said, you know what? I'm Mayor Shaheen. It's so nice to meet you. Please have a seat. He said, I can't wait to hear everything you want to share with me. He said, but I need to ask you to do me a favor. And they were like, oh, what? And he says, I need you to point at me while you're doing it. And they're like, what? He said, I need you to point at me while you're doing it. And he said, some of them would just kind of do, and they'd drop their hand. He goes, no, keep pointing, keep pointing. He said, some of them came across the desk, and they're about to hit me in the chest with their finger. And he said, after I said, is there any other details you wanted to share with me? I'm like, no. And he goes, okay. Got one question for you real quick. Before I tell you the question, I just got to tell you, I agree. That is a huge problem in our city. I agree wholeheartedly. And you may find this hard to believe, but I'm aware of almost all of the problems. But what I lack is solutions. So here's what I need you to do. How many of your fingers are pointing back at you? Well, 3. And he goes, yes. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to go home and think of the 3 best solutions to this problem. And come back at this exact time next week and give me the 3 solutions and which one you think is the best solution and what we can do about it. And he said they would say some things and left. Honestly, 300 people. Somebody want to take a guess how many came back the next week? 30-0-1. One woman came back. And I said, well, how did that go? And he goes, unbelievable. I was like, really? He goes, yeah. She came back. She said, Mayor, here's the 3 solutions, but I'm going to tell you this is the best one. And she gave the reasons why. And he goes, I agree. And he said, what, Ken? She goes, let me stop you right there. I think I got it. If I need any help, I'll let you know. And just left. And I said, how did it go? He goes, unbelievable. Totally changed an entire section of our city. Just this woman, she just needed somebody to go, okay, I'm with you. Okay, call me. He said, here's my personal number. You call me if you need anything. There's not a lack of passivity. There's not a lack of those wanting to let go of responsibility. And in the church today, I want to hit the last one, and that is to lead courageously. That's the third one. Lead courageously. Adam failed to lead in the garden. Jesus led by providing direction for others. And he told his disciples, follow me. I'm going to lead in this. Jesus led by providing protection for others. He said, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. You can trust that I'm going to die before I let any harm come to you. Jesus led by providing life. The first Adam became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit that lead courageously. I want to give you one example of that. When my daughter was diagnosed with cancer, the first week we were home after the initial hospital stay, several people, hey, we're praying for you, doing this. I had one buddy, he has a landscaping company. I'm getting the mail, and he parks on the curb in his truck, and he goes, hey, man, I'm really sorry about Kennedy. I was in the area, wanted to stop and let you know we're praying for her. I said, Royce, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And he says, yeah, I want to let you know this too. I've got crews in this area every week, and we're going to do your yard this year. And I was like, dude, if you could just do it one time, I'm just trying to figure all this out. That would be a huge help. Because we're going to do it all year. And I said, you know what? If you just do it for a month, that's going to give me time to kind of figure out what's going on. And I really appreciate it. He goes, yeah, you're really not listening. We're doing your yard all year. And he did. And I had a great looking yard, but that's not what he gave me. What he gave me was something I didn't know I needed, and that was time. Because that first year of treatment, we were in the hospital on average 3 days a week, 3 nights a week usually, in the middle of the night, and not knowing whether we're coming home or not. And that's what he gave me, because he said, hey, I know you're going to have a need, and all I'm going to do is, I can't do a lot, but I can cut grass, and I can take care of a yard. So I'm going to take the lead on this and do that. It's that initiative. And then the final one, which kind of comes out of that lead courageously, is invest eternally. Invest eternally. Adam invested in the temporary, choosing what was satisfying him in the moment. Peace with his wife, eat the apple. Jesus invested eternally. He lived it and he taught it. In Matthew 6:19 through 20, he said, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thief breaks in and steal. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. It's to have an eternal mindset. I can't think of an example, but I believe this quote is true. Almost any purely selfish act reaps eternal rewards and results. Anything we do purely selflessly will result in some kind of ripple effect in an eternal perspective. So on page 43, 44, we've got those 4 pieces there. Reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and invest eternally. With those there, it's hopeless to live this out without the life-giving spirit of Jesus fueling our journey. It's a great idea, but it's not really possible without Christ living that in us. and given us the wisdom and the strength to do it. So in conclusion, the last question I want us to kind of look at. List the 4 components of authentic in a definition without looking back at it. See if you can list it at your table without looking back. Secondly, which quality is most glaringly missing in our society today? List that one out. And which area of life, marriage, parenting, work, do you think men today struggle with passivity the most? Okay? Talk about those 3. I'm going to ask from your table. Tell me whatever question you want to answer and just give me an answer from your table in any of those. So see if you can name them, which is the glaring missing, and then what do you think is the struggle for passivity most? You got about 10 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. Ready? Go. All right. We're going to wrap it up with a little bit of overview. I want you to close your books for just 1 second. Close your books for 1 second. And you are going to grade yourself right now, whether you know them or not. With this, I'm going to say each of these, and I want you to say out loud if you know what the second blank is. So this is basically a definition of authentic manhood. A real man, an authentic man, would reject passivity, accept, lead, and invest eternally. Very good. All right, you can open your books if you want to. What quality is most glaringly missing from our society? Anybody? Responsibility. Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about what do you see as the biggest ones? And I think for 20, maybe 30-ish, it'd be also passivity of like, oh my gosh. And I was telling him that my oldest son, I hear this at least once a month. Dad, you can't say that. I'm like, I can't say what? Why? Because man, you get canceled and all that. It's like, and I think that's become so oppressive that those younger are just like, yeah, I'm just not going to say anything about anything because I can't. And the way the media is driving it is you can't disagree with the main thought or whatever. And I saw this one, which was stunning to me. So there's an organization in D.C., actually politically, it's absolutely divided down the middle because their whole origin is free speech. And they feel, it's called FIRE. And they said, you know what? If we don't have free speech and freedom to disagree and the forum to do it, then freedom will end. Because we have to have that. Because the greatest ideas come out of the collaboration of let's talk through it. So that's their mindset. They did a survey with thousands of young adults, so 35 and under. What percentage of those 35 and under said there's 2 genders, male and female? What percentage do you think that is today? This is a great example of how media has just overwhelmed. 98.2% said that there's male or female. And yet, if you were to listen to the media, you would think it's, oh man, you can't say that. So they had to do it through a survey where they were anonymous. And they said, it's ridiculous. It's medical. It's by, and it's like, wow. But that's where society's gone. So I would agree with that. Which area of life do you think men today struggle with passivity the most? This is all ages. And there's not an answer. Which did you think or discuss at your tables? I know you're discussing. I heard you talking. So marriage, there's a real tendency to just go, okay, all right, I give up. Yeah. Parenting, that's another big one. That's a big one. Just, you know what, let them game, let them do whatever. Give them a computer, keep them from. How many of you have been to a restaurant and seen a table with kids and none of them had a screen in front of them? I haven't seen it. And here's the real example of that. How many of you have been to a restaurant where the parents with kids are not looking at their phone at any point during the time? It's it's a lack of, engagement and leadership. So I would encourage you this week. One, so I'm going to tell you, you're going to have, let's see, 5 people. You're going to have 3 minutes at your table to answer these 2 questions, or this one question, okay? But I want to give you this first. Go ahead and open your books, because this week, the article on page 48 and 49, and then the quotes on page 50 and 51. I would even encourage you to look over those quotes before you start your car to go home and pick your favorite quote. Mine just comes to mind as the last one under Invest Eternally. Jim Elliot, the missionary who went to the Inca Indians and was killed on the shores, he said, "A man is no fool to give what he cannot keep, to gain what he cannot lose." And I love that quote. The John Wayne quote at the top of The Courageous is probably my favorite one of those. Courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. I love that. Manly man. Look at those quotes this week and read those. And I'd love it if you were to come next week with your favorite quote off that page to share with the group. But that clear vision of authentic manhood article is really good as well. But here's your 2 minutes, and then we're going to wrap up because we're good ahead of time tonight. What is your takeaway from tonight? When your wife or your friends go, "What did you talk about?" Can you name at least 2 or 3 of the 4 characteristics of an authentic man, and or what's the one piece you heard, talked about, or whatever? You've got 30 seconds each person at your table to do it. Go around the table, go. All right, well, let's wrap it up for tonight. Hopefully you have something to take home with you, something to work on. Bring a quote next week. Just that action of doing something. I came up with this, I believe it was from the Lord, but this idea, because I can get stuck so often and just go, it's just so overwhelming. Is it really worth it? And it's not going to make a difference. And this phrase really came to my mind. The smallest action is greater than the grandest intention. Do something. Do something with it. Well, let me pray, and we'll get out a couple minutes early tonight. Father, thank you so much for this time. Thanks for these men just being willing to share and talk and ingest. And Father, I do pray specifically that we would reject passivity, and we would step up, and we would take responsibility, and we would lead courageously. And Lord, will you just put in our hearts how to make an effect and impact eternally. And we just thank you for tonight. And as we go home, I pray that you bring to my mind and our minds what you want to exact in our lives. And we love you for it. It's only through Christ we can pray. We thank you. Amen.